Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for being with us this evening. My name is Kristen Lillyman, and I am an engagement specialist with Dillon Consulting. I will be your third-party facilitator for this evening. We have been working with the city to coordinate and facilitate the engagement for the Municipal Comprehensive Review, or as you may know it, our Plan Toronto. Many of you may have attended meetings with us this week or meetings with the city on the official plan in the fall, or recent meetings on environment and climate change in April. Then we had some meetings on the draft vision and directions in May and earlier in June. This is a policy themed meeting specifically to dig deeper on a specific topic. And tonight's focus is on housing and intensification. We have already held meetings this week on two other subjects. One was on employment lands and the future of work, which was on Tuesday evening. And we had one last night as well on neighborhoods and complete communities. So we'll go to the next slide. And I'm going to begin this evening with a land acknowledgement. The City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on their traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Acknowledging the land that we are on is really only a small piece of recognizing the contributions and the history of Indigenous peoples, as well as our ongoing learning and our progress towards reconciliation. It is important to recognize that the Indigenous connection to the land that we now call Toronto, as well as Lake Ontario, date back at least 10,000 years. A key part of our Plan Toronto is and has been the integration of and amplification of Indigenous voices, perspectives, history, and understandings as part of this process. Next slide. So just to go through the agenda for this evening, so it will include a backgrounder and a refresher on the official plan. And then this meeting, as I mentioned, will have a focus on housing and intensification, which includes sharing information on inclusionary zoning, as well as an overview of the MTSA PMTSAs. So as you see on the agenda, there's time for questions and discussion between each section. And then at the end of the meeting, we're going to share some next steps with you and wrap up the meeting by 7 p.m. this evening. Next slide. So a few introductions of who is at the meeting tonight. So we're joined by those at the city who are leading the official plan, including Jeff Cantos, who I'll now ask to introduce the city team.
Thanks, Kristen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this summer evening. As Kristen said, my name is Jeff Cantos, the manager of the city's official plan team, and I'm joined by a number of colleagues from the city, and I'll just call their names out and they can wave. From the official plan team, Kyle, Jason, and Jessica. From those working from the MTSA team, the Major Transit Station Area team, Philip and Joshua. Our housing group, members of our housing group, Deanna and Christine. And I think I caught everybody. Back over to you. Oh, sorry. And members of my team will be active on the chat. So if you've got any questions in the chat, please do actively use it. Or when it's Q&A time, feel free to put your hand up. Back to you, Kristen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. So also from Dillon Consulting, along with myself, we have Ying Yi and Ish Chowdhury, who will be helping manage the meeting from behind the scenes, but also you may see their names in the chat, sharing links, and can also be responding to questions. And they're also going to be taking meeting minutes of this evening's conversation. I'd also love to welcome other participants. I already saw a couple introducing themselves in the chat, so introduce yourselves. We'd love to know who is with us today and get to know each other. The next slide. We're just going to go through some housekeeping before we begin the core part of the presentation. So please remain muted when you're not talking. If you do have a question or comment, please use the raise hand function, or as Jeff mentioned, you're welcome to put your question into the chat box. There will be dedicated discussion points throughout the presentation, as you saw in the agenda, and that's to address your questions, or you can provide your comments. Please introduce yourself before you say your remarks. This meeting, as you may have noticed, is being recorded today. But we will only post the presentation component of tonight. The comments, discussion, and questions that come about through the presentation from participants, that will only be used for note-taking purposes only. So just to comment on my role as meeting facilitator. So my job is to manage the discussion and make sure everyone gets a chance to be heard. And to ensure everyone's able to participate, we ask that you think about and raise the question that you most want to be answered. And we do strongly suggest one question per person, and you will be held accountable to that. If you don't get your question answered live, the Q&A will be in our engagement records. Next slide. So some participant guidelines on the next slide. We do welcome your questions and discussion, as we mentioned. There are no bad questions. Chances are, if you're thinking it, someone else is as well. We do want to hear from everyone. We believe that everyone has experience and wisdom to share. On that note, there will likely be differences in opinion. So be respectful and listen. The city is here today to listen to your input, your feedback, your thoughts, your perspectives. So please don't be shy to share them either in the chat or by raising your hand. Next slide. So the chat box will be available throughout this meeting. We are encouraging the use of the chat box to share ideas and get to know each other. And again, the city project team will be monitoring and will try to respond to questions there when they can. And you don't have to wait till those dedicated discussion points. You can put your question or comment in throughout the presentation. Just a reminder to be respectful. We do want to keep it active, and if there are disrespectful or abusive comments, we will have to close the chat. Next slide. So meeting purpose. Why are we here tonight on this beautiful evening? Well, city staff are going to provide an overview of the official plan and then some of those related housing and intensification policies. We also want to hear your feedback. So we're going to open it up to that questions and dialogue with the group. Then we're going to share some next steps with you and let you know how you can continue to be engaged in our Plan Toronto. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot of the project process. The project initially launched in May of 2021, and we've gone through parts 1, which is the vision and priorities, and part 2, asking big questions and setting policy directions. And during that time, the city and our Dillon engagement team were doing a lot of listening through public meetings, youth engagement, online engagement and surveys, meetings with Indigenous rights holders and organizations, and through a community leaders circle. Now we're at the point in part 3 where the city has created draft policies. And we have continued to meet with lots of people and organizations to discuss our Plan Toronto. So far in phase 3, we have held meetings, as I mentioned, on the draft environment and climate change policies, a series of public meetings on the draft vision and directions. Then we've had these 3 policy focus meetings, and this is all leading to a report on July 5th to Planning and Housing Committee. We will have some additional engagement after July 5th, including more engagement on the draft vision and directions of the official plan. So stay tuned. Next slide. So in part 1 and part 2, and so far in part 3, we have held over 75 meetings and met with over 2,300 people. And that's been including internal and external stakeholders, organizations, companies, and residents. And that work has included a focus on reaching underrepresented populations and groups that work with them. So that has included Indigenous rights holders and organizations, youth, and that was done through schools and school boards, seniors through the Seniors Roundtable, and we held some focus conversations, like around accessibility and for specific geographies like Scarborough. We also had an online component to our engagement, and the Our Plan website and our story maps, which is an online resource that you can explore information, data, and maps related to Our Plan Toronto, have received over 10,000 visits. Next slide. So our team organized all of the input we have received to date into some key themes. The cross-cutting themes that you see on the left are themes that came forward in every meeting across different organizations and groups in different communities and with Indigenous organizations. And what emerged were a few things, but one was having a key focus on equity, inclusion, and relationship building. And that included addressing inequities across the city, a call to be more inclusive, reflect the diversity of the city, require universal and accessible design. Another theme was community-led solutions. So that involved working collaboratively with communities, especially when it came to big change, like big development. Learning from the past and implementation. So I was going into a project in a community with an understanding of the history of that community and a history of the issues in that community. Aligning priorities and conversations, and that really meant getting everyone on the same page. And that also included leadership alignment. So the other themes in darker green on the right-hand side were the most frequently discussed issues. And so some of the issues there are housing affordability and the scale of intensification, some of which you'll hear about this evening, and that's primarily the topic of this evening. Environment and climate change, and those were some meetings that we held in April, and that included a plan to get to net zero, promote active transit, protecting green space and trees, jobs, which was particularly heightened in COVID, safety for all, and complete communities, where every neighborhood needs a complete communities approach. Next slide. So we're going to have a couple engagement moments throughout the presentation today, and that's just to get a little bit of your feedback and also to get to know who's participating today. So we're going to go to the next slide, and there's some instructions there. So if you have your smartphone handy, or if you just on your desktop browser, you can go to the website www.menti.com. And there is also a link in the chat as well that Ish has put in there. So there's a code that you go and enter once you're on the site, 86085607, or you can also just scan the QR code that's on the screen using your smartphone camera app. So, and you'll click the link once you're prompted. So we'll give a couple moments for people to get onto the Mentimeter. And again, we have a couple questions at the start just to understand who our audience is this evening and who's participating here. So maybe we'll go to the polling results. So we'll have some live polling results. You'll see what people are saying right live on the screen. So we already have some people who have participated. If you haven't logged on yet, you can see the instructions right at the top of your screen there. It's www.menti.com, and the code is 86085607. So I see we have people from across the city, but many people tuning in from Toronto East York. We'll give it a couple moments to allow other people to log on. Okay, maybe we'll go to, oh, I still see a couple people coming online there. Okay, great. So maybe we'll go to the next question. So the next question is, as I had outlined earlier in the presentation, we've had a number of engagement activities over the course of our Plan Toronto so far. So just wondering if you have participated in any of those activities before, some of those meetings or online. So far we have many of us, many people tonight who have participated, a strong majority have participated in the past, so welcome back. Happy to have you back joining us. And then we have some people, it's your first meeting for this project, so welcome and thanks for being here with us. Okay, maybe we'll go to the next question. And this is for those 19 people who said, yes, I have participated in the past. How did you participate? How did you previously participate? Was it through a citywide virtual meeting, a different virtual meeting that could have been a stakeholder meeting, completed an online survey, a member of the community leaders circle via website or social media, or visited the story map? And you can select all that apply here. Okay, so many of you have participated in a virtual meeting with us in the past, and many of you have also participated online. There is a question in the chat about what is a story map, and there are some links in the chat already to take you there. But it's a link from the website that is basically an online resource to learn more about the project. Very visual, and there's usually some maps and data that you can explore and learn more about. I just see that someone else linked it in the chat there too, so you can check it out. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So this is a question about the Toronto Official Plan. How familiar are you with the Toronto Official Plan? So this is just to get a sense from the participants tonight on how familiar you are with the document, because we will have Jeff go through an official plan refresher. So it's good for us all to know how what the range is in the participants of familiarity. So most people seem to be moderately familiar, and then a couple very familiar, and one extremely, and some slightly as well. Okay, so most people are at least somewhat familiar with the official plan. Great. So we're going to go to our next question, which is our last question for this this engagement moment. And this is how do you currently use the Toronto Official Plan? So as a resident, as a member of a group or organization, for work, as a student and education, other, and not sure. So many people are using it as a resident or a member of a group or for work, some as a student, and one is other and one not sure. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I will ask you to leave your Mentimeter app open, because we will have one more question towards the end of the session. But we will go back to the presentation for now, and I will hand it over to Jeff to provide an overview and the background on the official plan.
Great, thanks, Kristen. Next slide, please. So thanks for your participation in the Mentimeter polls. It helps me to see how deep I should go in this refresher. So there's about 60 attendees tonight. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. So this slide shows 3 different maps. The first map on the bottom right is the city of Toronto, where our population is about 2.8 million. And we, the city, are nestled into the Greater Golden Horseshoe area with a population of just over 10 million. And that's the city of Toronto, with our neighboring municipalities, with York Region to the north, Peel to the west, Durham, all the way up to the county of Simcoe and Barrie up there in the north. And the region is, again, nestled into the province of Ontario, with a population nearing 15 million. Next slide, please. So land use planning in the province is a policy-led system, and this image here kind of shows the nestling of the policy documents that we as planners rely upon. So at the kind of top tier are the matters of provincial interest. So the province sets out planning legislation through the Planning Act, and the province also sets out the provincial policy statement, which is a document, a statement of values set out by the province that applies to the entire province. And all land use decisions must be consistent with the provincial policy statement, or the PPS. The next level down is about regional growth, and so the province again sets out regional growth plans. So the first one being the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe area, so that middle map in the previous slide. And some of you might have heard about the Greenbelt, and there's a Greenbelt plan also that the province sets out, for which land use decisions must conform to. And in the middle there, in terms of the citywide vision, so the Planning Act, again, at the top tells all requires municipalities to have an official plan and to review those official plans regularly. And so that is what we're here to talk about, is this the review of our official plan. And nestled within our official plan are what we're calling area priorities. Sometimes they're called secondary plans, and usually they result from local area studies. And there's also what are sometimes called precinct plans. So just kind of several blocks of a roadmap for the future of this area. And from there, how we implement those at the city, there is area-specific implementation, sometimes through area-specific zoning bylaws, and on the very ground, site-specific precision, which are zoning bylaw standards. So, for example, the maximum height of a building, or the number of parking spots that are required for each development. Next slide, please. So in the middle of that nestling document, what I call the citywide vision is the official plan. And this is a city planning document that acts as Toronto's roadmap for land use matters into the future. This document sets out our long-term vision, shared values, and policies that help guide decision-making on land development, economic growth, the environment, and more. And as I mentioned, the province requires municipalities to have an official plan and to review them regularly. So this is why we're here tonight is part of the what's technically called the Municipal Comprehensive Review. That is the 5-year review of our official plan. And the growth plan, that regional layer of a provincial policy, sets out growth forecasts for the city for all municipalities within the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And so the city needs to, we need to demonstrate that our official plan conforms to that plan and those forecasts. And the population forecasts for Toronto is a minimum of 700,000 people and a minimum of 450,000 jobs that we have to accommodate by the year 2051. And so we are undertaking that exercise. Next slide, please. So in terms of our official plan, there are 5 main chapters that encompass the policies, the citywide policies. And in chapter 4, at the bottom kind of gear, there's the land use designation map at the bottom right, which shows the city of Toronto and the different land use designations across the city. And on the next slide, please. When you look at our designation map, our land use designations, the breakdown of the official plan that we're reviewing breaks the city down to about 75% of the city not expected to accommodate much growth, and 25% that will accommodate most of the growth for 30 years. And the plan that we're reviewing had a plan horizon to 2030. So we have got to update our plan out to 2051 as required by the province. So on the right side of the slide, you'll see if the city was broken down into a perfect 100 blocks, 19% of the city are dedicated to roads, which don't have a land use designation, whereas they're in the middle, about 35% of the city has a land use designation of neighborhoods. And on the bottom of the slide, there is about 13% of our city designated as what are known as core employment areas and general employment areas in purple, and about just over 5% that are designated mixed use areas. And then our official plan contains policies associated with each land use designation. Next slide, please.
Christine, are you with us?
Sorry, I'm here. My sound was cutting out, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. Great.
Okay, yeah, you sound okay.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Christine. I'm a senior planner in the City Planning Housing Policy Group. happy to be here tonight to share some information with you on the city's recently adopted inclusionary zoning policy. Some of you I recognize from consultations over the past number of years on inclusionary zoning. For those of you who are new to the concept, inclusionary zoning, or IZ, what we're really talking about is new developments to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing. And that housing can be affordable that are targeted to low and moderate income households. So really the purpose of the policy is to ensure that as we see new housing supply in our city, we're also seeing new affordable housing supply take place. Next slide, please.
Christine, your audio is chopping up. Maybe if you try turning off your video.
Sure, sorry about that. Let me know if it's better. I've got my video off now.
Better.
As I mentioned, so we've started consulting initially on Toronto's inclusionary zoning policy back in 2019. On the inclusionary zoning policy, looking at housing needs in our city and the financial.
Christine,
Yeah,
sorry, you're still cutting out a bit, so I'm not sure if there's anything you can like shut off on your computer or
okay, let me
yeah.
Christine, why don't you change your audio and I can I'll take the slide.
Sure.
And choose your for you to phone in. But so on this slide, this basically shows the process by which the city undertook in order to get to implement our inclusionary zoning framework. So it started back in 2019 with some draft documents, some policy directions. Into 2021, there was a final assessment report, and leading up to November 21 for City Council approval. And concurrent to this, at the bottom of the slide, there's the gray arrow shows that the protected major transit station area delineations, which we'll talk about in a bit, is the where inclusionary zoning could be applied across the city. So there'll be a presentation, a more detailed presentation on that very shortly. Throughout this, there's been active consultation and engagement that Christine and her team have undertaken. And upon Council's adoption of the inclusionary zoning framework, there was also a requirement of the city to do an assessment after year one to review the implementation of inclusionary zoning. Next slide. Christine, do you want to try your audio? Okay, let us know when you're able to come on your audio, Christine. Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, clear. Go for it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff, for taking over. Sorry about that. So as we developed the policy, we really were trying to keep three key principles in mind. The first, obviously, is to support the creation of new affordable housing in the city. Secondly, we wanted to create more inclusive mixed income communities. And finally, we want to ensure that market housing development continue to be supported. And so in developing the IZ policy, it's really was about finding the sweet spot between these three key principles, because we know that inclusionary zoning is a tool that depends on market development to deliver affordable housing. The avatars on this slide here show some examples of individuals or families who could be supported by the affordable housing units created through inclusionary zoning. So generally, we're talking about low to moderate income households earning about between $30,000 and $90,000 a year who would be supported by affordable rental units or affordable ownership opportunities that are created through inclusionary zoning. Next slide, please. So as part of the consultations that took place over the past few years, we really wanted to hear from residents about their key priorities for the inclusionary zoning policy. Understanding that if we prioritize certain elements of the policies, other elements had to be balanced out. So throughout consultations on the policy, we heard the two key priorities for IZ were to establish a 99-year affordability period, really to make sure we're creating a long-term stock of affordable housing through the policy. And then the second key priority that we heard from was about ensuring the affordable units are actually affordable to low and moderate income households. So we incorporated an income-based approach into how we define affordable housing for inclusionary zoning. As well as part of the policy, we aren't relying on city financial incentives in order to support the affordable units to ensure that the policy itself is financially sustainable for the city over time. Recognizing all of this and the fact that inclusionary zoning can only be implemented in these protected major transit station areas, we identified initial set-aside rates of 5 to 10%. And by set-aside, I mean the percentage of affordable housing that's required in a development. The policy itself also identifies a phase-in of the policy. So beginning in 2025, that 5 to 10% starts to increase. In 2026, the policy is extended to purpose-built rental development, and then by 2030, inclusionary zoning will require between 8 to 22% of a development to be affordable. The range depends on whether the project is delivering affordable ownership units or affordable rental units, and depends on what location in the city, where the development is located in the city. So if we go to the next slide, it shows a map of where inclusionary zoning will apply across the city. And essentially it'll be within those areas, 500 to 800 meters of those yellow dots being our future protected major transit station areas. The different shades of blue indicate what level of affordable housing is required. So the deepest shade of blue, being the downtown, will have the highest requirements for affordable housing. The lightest shade of blue will have the lowest requirements. And then areas marked as gray with the white dots will have no mandatory requirements for affordable housing at the outset of the policy. And these different shades of blue and locations where inclusionary zoning will apply was really informed by that extensive background analysis that we undertook, looking at market conditions across the city and looking at how the policy, how these mandatory affordable housing requirements would impact the financial viability of development. With that being said, even though some areas of the city aren't captured by inclusionary zoning at the outset of the policy, doesn't mean it won't begin to apply at a future date. So as Jeff mentioned, we've committed to reviewing the policy and doing that background analysis 1 year after implementation. We're also currently undertaking additional market analysis in some areas of the city, including Mount Dennis, Little Jamaica, the Shepherd Corridor East, to look at whether there are opportunities to add on those mandatory affordable housing requirements. I also wanted to mention, we know inclusionary zoning on its own isn't going to solve all of Toronto's housing affordability challenges. Inclusionary zoning is really one policy, one initiative that's being advanced as part of a broader housing teal action plan that identifies a range of policies, initiatives, and programs to address housing challenges across the housing spectrum, from homelessness to supportive housing to social housing, all the way up to market housing. So really, inclusionary zoning is one tool in the toolbox that the city is advancing to help increase our supply of affordable housing. Next slide. So just in terms of next steps, I wanted to flag that we are currently consulting on draft implementation guidelines, providing more guidance around implementation matters, such as how those affordable units are integrated into a building, requirements around unit sizes, more guidance around administration, advertising, and access for those affordable units, As well, as I noted, we're currently undertaking additional market area analysis in certain areas of the city. On both of these pieces, we will be reporting back in the next term of council, so sometime in 2023. And then finally, in the most critical next step is advancing these protected major transit station area delineations and getting them approved by the province so that we're able to begin implementing inclusionary zoning in the city. So that's it for the presentation. I'll pass it back to Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen. Next slide, please. All right, so many of you have probably seen a version of this presentation before. So I'm still going to give a bit of an overview of the process we've taken to come up with our major transit station area delineations. But this presentation will focus a bit more on what we're actually presenting to Planning and Housing Committee on July 5th. So for an overview of what is a major transit station area, this is something set out in the provincial growth plan that we are required to do by the province. So the province sets out that for every station, we must individually delineate areas around existing and planned transit stations. So we have to draw the boundaries. And it defines a major transit station area as the area between 500 to 800 meters, or generally a 10-minute walk. The province also sets out minimum density targets, which vary by the mode of transit. So for subways, there are the highest requirements of 200 people and jobs per hectare, followed by light rail transit at 160 people and jobs per hectare, and GO Rail at 150 people and jobs per hectare. Next slide, please. So a subset of those major transit station areas are the protected major transit station areas. And Christine really just did that overview. So again, just to reiterate, these are the station areas where we can implement inclusionary zoning. And that makes up about 107 of the total major transit station areas in the city. Next slide, please. We have a two-step growth management strategy for our major transit station areas. So the step one is really to tick the box and make sure that we're meeting provincial requirements to satisfy the growth plan. In this phase, we set out official plan framework with minimum density targets, and we identify the lands to which inclusionary zoning applies. Step two is the future density near transit. So again, we're setting out minimums right now. The maximums can be changed in the future as long as we don't go underneath the minimums that we've set. So this step two is about increasing density based on local area studies, zoning updates, and development applications. And some recent examples of this are the Danforth study, the Golden Mile Secondary Plan, the Mount Dennis study, Midtown in Focus, and other such studies. Next slide, please. In terms of the progress we've made on the major transit station areas, we have 18 final protected major transit station areas that have been adopted by council in December 2020 and 2021. These are all awaiting ministerial approval. Our upcoming report on July 5th at Planning and Housing Committee will have final recommendations on 115 major transit station areas and protected major transit station areas. And we'll go through a map of those in the next couple of slides. Public input since the time we released the drafts has resulted in some changes to delineations. And so I have some specific slides outlining those changes, including one on Long Branch. And then the remainder of the major transit station areas, 7 of them, require additional studies in order to demonstrate that we meet the minimum density targets. Next slide, please. So this is an overview map of the 115 recommended major transit station areas that will be brought to July 5th Planning and Housing Committee. So again, you can see the white dots represent major transit station areas and the yellow are protected major transit station areas. There are some differences between this map and the one that we've been showing earlier, because in some cases, notably in the Little Jamaica area on Eglinton West, we were directed by council to make a station a protected major transit station area in case that market area changes in the future, so that the framework would be there for inclusionary zoning if the market area changes. But right now, even though they're going forward as protected major transit station areas, they won't be subject to inclusionary zoning unless that work that Christine was talking about happens, and they're shown to be able to support that. Next slide, please. Now I want to go into an overview of the revisions that we've made since the drafts were published. The major revision that you'll see is that we removed the Shepherd LRT stations from our work program. And that's because we spoke to the province and they confirmed that the province is no longer going forward with the Shepherd LRT and it will be instead a subway. But the stations haven't been determined and I don't think there's funding committed at this time. So we will do that at a later date. And the Young Commerce Station is in a similar situation where the funding was pulled by the province. And so the station won't be being built at this time. Similarly, the city can choose to fund the station on our own, but the funding is not committed. And if that funding does show up at some point in the future, we'll do the work to make sure that that station is planned appropriately. We've also done some minor adjustments to minimum development densities. There was a missing parcel in the Park Lawn protected major transit station area, which we added. And then we adjusted 0.6 or 3 unit minimum in neighborhoods to 0.5 FSI or 3 units for Long Branch, Old Mill, Pioneer Village, Rowntree Mills, Tobermory, York Mills, and York University PMTSAs. That's because our citywide framework shifted from 0.6 to 0.5 between the time we drafted these stations and put them out as final. We also revised the delineations for York Mills, Broadview, and Long Branch, which I'll go into in a second. And there was a change in density target for Long Branch. Next slide, please. For York Mills and Broadview protected major transit station areas, through community feedback, we added 2 areas shown in orange on the slides. The Broadview station addition was the city school, which currently is designated parks, but the community pointed out that it should be included in case there's a development that occurs and in case the land use designation changes, they would want to secure affordable housing on that site. And then for York Mills, community members noted that the block that we added is similarly close to the York Mills subway station and contains lots that are a little bit larger and would be appropriate for multi-unit development. Next slide, please. Okay, this brings us to the Long Branch protected major transit station area. So thanks to community feedback, I'm including the Long Branch Neighborhood Association members on the call today. We understand that there's a significant amount of intensification planned for the area in orange, which is the site of currently a No Frills Shoppers Drug Mart retail plaza with significant surface parking. So we added that to the delineation, recognizing that it's walkable to the station and that it contains significant intensification potential. As a result of adding those lands, the station area can now achieve the provincially required minimum density target of 150 people and jobs per hectare, and it no longer requires a lowered target. So again, this number, the planned number, is achieved using the existing zoning. So those 200 or those 2,200 units that are permitted on that site were able to boost the Long Branch PMTSA to be to achieve the target without changing the planning framework in this area. And we can go back to the slide if there are further questions on Long Branch, but next slide, please. There are 7 stations that require additional work, as I mentioned. The Mount Dennis station, there's a draft out for consultation, so that's advanced a little bit. And then the Chaplin and Avenue stations along the Eglinton LRT will be brought to July 5th Planning and Housing Committee as well. And at that time, we'll add them to the map and they'll be out for review. The remaining stations, Royal York, Glencairn, Finch Kennedy and Lawrence on the Scarborough subway extension need a little bit more work before we can determine whether we can meet the planned targets for those stations.
Sure. Thanks, Kristen, and thank you everyone for the really good discussion tonight. It's been a couple weeks of engagement that we've been doing. This is our last stop of engagement before final reports get considered by the decision makers. So with that, so on July 5th, Planning and Housing Committee will be considering a final report on the major transit station areas and the PMTSAs, the protected major transit station areas. That report will be made public, I believe, early next week. So usually 1 week before July 5th, so early next week. We'll also be presenting a final report on our citywide employment policies and what are known as employment area conversions. That's the land use designation to introduce residential uses in our employment areas across the city. So that final report also is going to be considered on July 5th. That will be made public very early next week. And from there, that goes to Big City Council, I think on July 19th, these two reports. And council then can adopt, amend. They have a series of decision paths they can make. And whatever council adopts on July 19th and 20th will go up to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for his or her approval, as the minister is the approval authority on this stream of work. There are other streams of work that are going to be considered on July 5th. Planning and Housing Committee, including a series of reports on expanding housing options in neighborhoods. Again, that the agenda will be made public early next week. And the work's not done yet, because Phil mentioned several major transit station areas that we have to continue to do some background work. For example, Royal York is one of them, which we will do. This is the last city council prior to their election break. And so members of my team will continue their work throughout the fall. And when a city council returns and starts to sit to do committee meetings, we will bring in early 2023 draft and final reports for other major transit station areas and the employment area conversions as well, including our revised Chapter 1 for the official plan. So we'll continue our engagement. And yeah, so again, thank you for your participation. Back to you, Kristen.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So we're going to go to another, our last poll for the evening. So we're just going to see so go back to your Mentimeter, your smartphone or your desktop application of Mentimeter, and we're going to have one more poll. And it's, as Jeff and I both mentioned, there is going to be ongoing engagement through the fall and into the winter. And we want to know how you want to be engaged. How do you want to continue to stay involved in this project, Our Plan Toronto? So we have a couple options here. Virtual meetings like we have tonight, in-person pop-ups, so smaller scale local in-person events, an e-bulletin, so a newsletter that would arrive to your email on the website, story map updates, so that online resource to explore data and maps and information related to the project, or through social media. Okay, so see lots of people wanting to have future virtual meetings, a couple for in-person pop-ups and story map updates and social media. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for participating in this. So we're going to go to our second last slide. And this is, as we all mentioned, this is our last meeting in a series of policy-themed meetings. So we've completed this meeting this evening. We do still have a couple story maps that are live on the Our Plan website. So you can access those, including the MTSA one, and there Ish has just linked to them in the chat. So please visit there to, you can provide comments on the MTSAs directly there. And there's also a story map on future directions. So you can explore the draft vision, directions, and principles for the new official plan. So we're going to go to the next slide, and I just want to again echo Jeff's comments of thank you for all your comments and questions today. Certainly heard a lot from everyone. It was a very interactive group, so really appreciate it. Heard about developments going to the Ontario Land Tribunal and the OP limitations sometimes, concerns about inclusionary zoning in low-rise neighborhoods, housing supply and wanting more supply so people can be able to afford to live here, a need for deeply affordable housing, and that toolbox that Christine mentioned, some specific comments about boundaries of MTSAs, PMTSAs, certainly the importance of our trees and our tree canopy came up, and protection for our floodplains, support for the expanding housing in our neighborhoods initiative, and then protection for renters as well. So heard a lot of variety of great feedback and questions this evening. So again, a big thank you. Just I see a question coming up, and there will be meeting minutes and the presentation slides, and the video clip will be all on ourplan.ca, toronto.ca/ourplan, what you can see on your screen there. So thank you everyone for being with us this evening, and stay in touch. Have a good night.